All right, so now we're in Baja mode. So, you know, the leash is off. And you can hear the sound of it, and it picks up throttle a lot better. There's way less stability control intervention. Carry the brakes deeper, turn in, punch it, tail steps out, and coming to a stop. And that's it. That's a quick lap. Too quick.
Dan wants more.
More. This is the new Ford Ranger Raptor, and I have to say, I'm really excited about this one. Why is that? Well, there's been a Ranger Raptor for a while in other parts of the world, but we just didn't get it. But now with the redesigned Ford Ranger, they're bringing us a Ranger Raptor. And I gotta say, this is pretty incredible. I mean, its tread width is 3.5 inches wider, long travel suspension, all the Raptor ingredients, but applied to a Ranger this time. So the Ranger Raptor is powered by a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 EcoBoost engine that makes 405 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque. That's quite a bit. Compare that to the regular Ranger, which starts with a 2.3-liter 4-cylinder engine that makes 270 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, and you can see that the Raptor just has it all over the regular Ranger. A couple of interesting things I'm seeing here. Of course, a cold air intake that feeds through the grill, through the slot. Also interesting is they've put the wiper fluid tank in here inside the fender, and the horns are also mounted on the fenders inside. Strange, but space saving. So we're making our way up the hill here, and we're in rock crawl mode, which automatically switches the transfer case into low range. Interestingly, the default is to have the rear locker on, but I've disconnected it because I want to have a little bit better turning radius, and you know, the binding of any lock differential kind of interferes with that, and this trail isn't really that radical, so I don't really need a locker. It's best not to use them until you need them. Anyhow, so far, I'm really liking the experience. The throttle control is really delicate. It's easy to modulate. The suspension is soaking up all of these jagged rocks without really tossing us around, and I haven't heard a squeak yet, so pretty impressed so far. It's pretty easy to see over the hood because, you know, it curves down just a little bit near the headlights. It's not really obvious from outside, but from inside, it's pretty easy to see over the hood. Now, obviously, right now, I'm cresting a hill that I can't see over, but I have this camera here that shows me a pretty good picture of what is ahead of me, and also predicts the path of my tires based on how I've got the steering turned. So that's really nice. The steering, though, is a little bit heavy for heavy's sake. It doesn't feel like, you know, it needs to be as heavy as it is, but on the other hand, I'm not seeing any kickback when I hit rocks. So, yeah, it's not trying to yank the wheel out of my hand when I go over an obstacle, well, like this one right here. And the other thing is, because this truck is a Ranger and not an F-150 Raptor, it's a lot narrower. And so when I'm negotiating between these really woody cedars, it's pretty easy to keep my distance and not scratch up the sides of the truck. So yeah, this thing feels right sized for trail work. So right now we're going down a steep hill, and we've got it in the trail control setting, and I'm gonna dial up my speed right now. It defaults to 1 mile an hour, and I'm going to go up to about 4 because it looks like that'd be okay. Now I've got my foot off the throttle, and the vehicle's just walking its way down this trail. I mean, the trail I'm on right now, at least at this point, doesn't really require that, but it's really nice that you can use the cruise control buttons here on the steering wheel to set a speed that you want to travel. And this is 4 miles an hour, and it's pretty nice. But if I wanted to go to 3.5 or 2.5, I could set it that, that specifically. One of the things about trail control that's kind of nice is if the trail is jostling your foot around and making the ride a little lurchy, using trail control means your foot isn't going to inadvertently depress the throttle and toss everybody around inside. You don't need that very often, but sometimes it's maybe nice to have. So the Raptor has 3.5 inches of additional track width on its long travel suspension than a regular Ranger, and it's 4.3 inches wider, although these fender flares are pretty subtle and nicely integrated into the doors that are shared with both of them. The tires here are BF Goodrich All-Terrain KO3s, and they're 33 inches tall, and these are the optional beadlock capable wheels. Now you can see this isn't really the beadlock ring, it's a placeholder. If you remove these bolts, there's another ring that's taller that does the bead locking, and that's an option. So these are beadlock capable wheels, but they're not set up as bead lockers right now. Up top, the Raptor stands 1.5 inches taller than a regular Ranger, and it has 1.4 inches more ground clearance underneath at the rear differential. Of course, these side step / rock rails are part of the deal, although I think I might take them off. Things get even more interesting in the rear, where the Ranger Raptor rides on a 4-link coil spring rear suspension. I mean, it's a solid axle, but it's located by 4 trailing links and sprung with coil springs. And those springs are mounted around Fox live valve dampers, which are adjustable on the compression side. But it gets even more interesting than that if you get further back. Most solid axles that are suspended by coil springs and located by 4 trailing links also have a 5th link, a panhard bar that spans from left to right that keeps the axle from moving left to right. But this doesn't have that. This has a Watts linkage, and a Watts linkage differs from a panhard bar in that it's made of 3 pieces. A link here that attaches to the frame on this side, another similar link that attaches to the frame on the other side, and a pivot in the middle that they both attach to that's connected to the differential housing. So what this does is allows the axle to have a lot of lateral stiffness in cornering, so it handles really well, but it also doesn't move left to right like a panhard bar setup can when the axle moves up and down. So this is a better solution, and it's not something you'll see on the Bronco Raptor or the F-150 Raptor. Yeah, they tuned the suspension really well. Kudos.
I think you're having fun.
All right, so now we're in Baja mode, which, safety's off, right? See what it does. Oh yeah, definitely more of everything, but less intervention. The water truck just came out, so it's all slippery. Of course, it's slippery compared to what? I've never driven it before, so I don't know. Oh, lots of sideways action here. Oh, nice berm. buddy, buddy. Boy, that water truck really dumped the load. Look up. You ready?
I'm ready. What are we doing, Dan?
We're gonna jump this thing. Here we go. That was fun. I think I nosed in a little bit, but who knows? You know, it's not an exact science jumping trucks. Well, I guess it is if you're Travis Pastrana, which I'm not. The bed of the Ford Ranger in the past hasn't really been anything to write home about, but this one's actually got some really interesting details. The biggest one, I think, is the distance between the wheel wells. It's now over 48 inches wide, which no other mini truck, except for maybe the Ridgeline, can say that. So now you can put plywood sheets, drywall, flat on the ground here. The other thing that's interesting is there are 6 tow hooks, the usual 4 in the corners, plus 2 partway up the side, like here and on the other side. And what are those for? Well, you've seen those little flip forward little cages you can get, accessories. They bolt to those holes here to like confine things near the back. Well, if you wanted to use the front of the tailgate while you've got that going on, you can use this tie down for your load that's in the forward part of the bed. So that's kind of a nice feature. There's also, of course, the cargo light here, but there are other lights here built in under the rails. And then there's a 110 and a 12 volt power outlet on that side over there. And then, of course, not really part of the bed, but this is now a power sliding rear window where it wasn't before. And the tailgate itself has torsion springs that make it easier to lift when you close it, and dampers, you can see it right here, that lets it go down slowly so it doesn't crash open. And then these cables are red, which is that way because they want you to see them so you don't trip over them when you hop out of the bed. The bed's also set up for accessories. There's a couple of extra threaded holes here, and then these plugs can be removed to install other components that either Ford or the aftermarket comes up with. Well, I have to say that the new Ranger is really impressive in terms of the way its interior appears and the materials they've used and the design, and that carries over to the Raptor. The Raptor's materials are obviously more black oriented. This is textured to try to look like carbon fiber, but not trying to fool you. You know, it isn't carbon fiber, but nobody's going to give them any grief for that. We've got red trim here, red stitching, this little red mark here, it's on the seats as well. But there's also thoughtful touches like, you know, this little shelf here where you can put a phone. There's an upper glove box in addition to a lower one. And there's a decent amount of storage here. It's not really big, but you can lay a phone here. This is a wireless charger, a couple of USB ports here, and the center console is pretty decent sized actually for the class. Also, you know, bottle holders in the door in addition to these cup holders, and a little slot here for your key or maybe a phone, pens. This is actually a very functional cabin, and it's also attractive. And the seats are comfortable, and then the rear seats, there's decent leg room back there, and the rear seat backs fold flat. Some of the other competitors like Toyota, the seats fold, but it's not quite flat, and this is flat. But generally, this is a huge step forward for the Ranger, and it used to be like my third favorite interior of the 3 mini trucks, and I think now it's my top choice. Now that I've driven the Ranger Raptor, I have to say I'm really impressed. Maybe more impressed than I expected to be. I mean, the suspension is really well tuned and it does everything right, whether you're driving fast, jumping, or driving over rocks and tiptoeing it. But, you know, the interior's great. It's a great place to spend time. Engine makes good power. You know, I really think it's a better truck than the Colorado ZR2 I drove in Nevada. Now, that was a different set of circumstances. That was wide open across the desert. This was a little different than that. But clearly, I think this one has the edge. Now, what don't we know yet? Well, we don't know anything about the Tacoma TRD Pro, which is the third contestant in this little contest. And so we'll have to see what that one's like and see if the Ranger Raptor is the king of the hill or second place. But I don't think it's third.